Yeah, hello. Here's Juma from Karma Games, and today I'm going to talk about Millennia, and especially with regard to the art direction in Millennia, which was a huge project. Thank you for tuning in our video. So this game is a Civ game about humanity, basically, which is going through 8 ages, starting with the Bronze Age and ending in the Near Future Age. And at the beginning of the game, we basically had to, first of all, define the start and end times of the eras. And then we had to find the best titles and motives for each card in each era. So there are many tech cards, buildings, and wonders in the game. And so, for instance, we had to find out what is like the best fitting natural science breakthrough in the medieval age, for instance. And this was a really big project, and I felt like I cannot make a Civ game and not be precise about it. So I really tried to read all the Wikipedia articles I could find in order to make the best decisions. But I soon realized I'm not a historian, and my knowledge is not sufficient to do this, to do a really good job in this manner. So I thought I need to reach out to people who know more about history than I do, and that's what I did. So I did reach out to former schoolmates who studied history. I reached out on Facebook, and more people basically volunteered to help us with their advice. And that was really cool and very fruitful. And I also did reach out to one special person, namely to my former high school teacher, who is incredibly knowledgeable in all kind of fields you can imagine, even fields that you probably never heard of. And so I at some point I thought, I mean, he's probably the most knowledgeable person I know. He knows basically almost everything. I will just call him and ask him if he has some spare time to help us as a scientific consultant. And so I did call him, and it was the perfect timing. He was just retired and had plenty of time, and it seemed like an interesting project to him, so he immediately said yes. And in the following, I had weekly calls with him, discussing details about historic inventions and buildings to make better choices. And in this short video, I want to highlight a few instances where his help was really helpful, and also some other cases where we really catched the detail and basically made sure that we do things very correct, historically precise. And so one example was the Chariot. We had the Chariot tech card, a military tech card for the Age 1, and Age 1 is supposed to represent the Bronze Age. And so in the beginning we just had like an illustration basically with horses, and I showed it to him, and he immediately refused the illustration. He said that's not possible. First of all, there are horses, and in the Bronze Age, chariots were first used in Mesopotamia, and they didn't have horses yet, so they didn't use horses for chariots. They actually used donkeys. And he also did some research on Wikipedia and some other sources, and he found out that not only did they use donkeys, but they used actually 4 solid wheels, which greatly limited the flexibility of the chariot. And it was very important to him because that we would stick to that, because the chariots back then were basically not as powerful as the Roman chariots in the classical era. So our illustration basically looked way too Roman for him in the beginning, and then we changed it and he was very happy. Another example was the Hagia Sophia. So first we had the Hagia Sophia as an illustration that basically looked like the Hagia Sophia today. But then we, up more research, we realized that the Hagia Sophia was really old, and when it was first built, it was actually a Christian temple, and it only became a Muslim much later, and the minarets were also added much later. So that's why we actually removed the minarets from the illustration to basically represent the Hagia Sophia at the time when it was built. This was also a pretty good catch. Yeah, and then another example was like we have a law tech card, and in the age 1, and in the beginning we just had the statue of Justitia because that's kind of the first thing we thought about. But then my former high school teacher, he actually had the idea that this wouldn't work so well because it's Roman. So again, it's like slightly imprecise. And instead, he suggested the Code of Hammurabi, which is the oldest and best organized and best preserved legal text from the Bronze Age. Yeah, so these are some examples. Another one is like we were looking for like the biggest natural scientist breakthrough in medieval age, and in the medieval age there were not so many natural science breakthroughs, and but one thing that did happen back then was there were some advancements in optics, and the most prominent figure in this regard was Alhazen, who was a medieval physicist in modern-day Iraq, and his research centered on parabolic mirrors. So these are just a few examples out of many, many more. We have more than 200 unique cards and illustrations, and yeah, we have put a lot of heart into the historical accuracy of those cards, and I hope you can appreciate it. And yeah, feel free to do also your own research. It can be really fun to delve into history using this game. Thank you so much for your support, and life is play.